So a little bit about this truck. This is my 1967 Chevy C10 long bed step side. And this is actually my daily driver. I've been driving it for about 3 years now. I even drive it in the wintertime, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I do it anyway. And it's a pretty good truck, but it needs some new coil springs. So in the front, it has your typical coil springs with your double A-arms. But in the rear, instead of having leaf springs, it actually has trailing arms and coil springs. So a little bit about this lowering kit here. I got this from CPP. This is Classic Performance Products, and I got this through Classic Industries. This is a 4-inch in the front and a 3-inch in the back. They call it a 4-3 lowering kit. And what's nice about this kit is that it's complete. So it comes with lowering shocks so that you don't have to go and buy shocks. It comes with front and rears. And I'll show you what those look like. I don't know if these are the fronts or the rears, but as you can see, they're pretty nice. It comes with new bushings in them already installed. And then as far as coil springs go, so these are the front coil springs, these bigger ones. And as you can see, they look really nice. I believe these are powder coated. I may be wrong, but they're pretty hefty. They feel really good in your hand. So hopefully they work good and last a long time. So those are for the front. And then the rear coil springs are a little bit different. So these are the rear here. Same thing, I believe they're powder coated. I may be wrong, but really nice again. And then as far as hardware goes, the kit also comes with the coil spring retainers for the rear. So this is what holds your coil springs in and keeps them from falling out. And then it also comes with the hardware for those. And all the bolts are grade 8 bolts. All look like they're zinc plated, so that's good. And as far as front shocks go, it comes with the front shock, I guess bolt. I'm not too sure what you call this thing, but I did not realize that this kit came with all this, so that's nice. And I went ahead and separately bought U-bolts. The kit does not come with U-bolts, but I decided to buy some new ones because the ones on this truck are pretty crusty, and if I broke them, I would have been kind of screwed. So I went ahead and bought U-bolts just in case I needed them, and they're really nice too. Again, they're all zinc plated. There's two different options. There's a long and a short. I went ahead and bought the long ones because I can always cut them off. So I'd much rather them be too long than too short. And it also comes with hardware as well. Again, zinc plated. They look really nice. So this is a pretty good kit. So there's two reasons why I'm putting in new coil springs. Number one, I have two coil springs that are cracked. I have the front driver's side is actually broken half, and then the rear passenger side is cracked. And the second reason is that the suspension on this truck is really wore out. I'll try to add in a video of just how bad the front suspension is. So as you can see, it's pretty worn out. So even though this lowering kit lowers the front 4 inches and the rear 3 inches, I don't think it's gonna be that much because it has 3-inch lowering blocks already in the rear. So the truck sits level as is, but that combined with, these are the original coil springs, so they're pretty sagged out. They probably got 1 inch of sag in them already. So it's probably not gonna be that drastic of a change. I'm hoping to get at least 1 inch of drop out of it. I'd like to have the front drop down just a hair bit lower than the rear, but I'm not too sure if that's going to happen or not. My plan here is to work on the back first and get it done, and then I'll move on to the front. So if you haven't seen what the suspension looks like on one of these trucks, it's pretty interesting. So basically you have these two trailing arms. So there's one here and there's one there, and those come back and they go underneath the axle, and then you have your shocks, and then you have this big, I guess a panhard bar is what it would be called. I don't know, but it's this big bar in here, and that keeps your axle centered. So it's a pretty interesting setup. And then these are the U-bolts that I'm talking about here, and that's what holds the axle down to these trailing arms here. It gets you a better look. So here's the 3-inch lowering blocks that are in it right now, and this one's already loose, so that's good, but the other one seems to be tight. So now they got the wheels off, you can kind of see where this coil spring here is cracked, and it is cracked all the way through to the other side. I'm assuming this top mount here isn't doing much. I'm guessing that the bottom mount here, which is still in pretty good shape, is what's keeping this coil spring in. It's definitely time for a new one. I'm going to attempt to heat up these nuts here, try to get some heat in them. So these U-bolt nuts take an 1 1/16 socket. And I got a breaker bar here. And then I'm going to slide a piece of pipe over it. See if I can't knock these things loose. Should just come out. Oh, yep. Cool. So just from comparing the old U-bolt to the new one, everything looks good. I'm probably going to have to cut these off. This one's going to be too long here, but as you can see, the threads go up about 1.5 inches higher on the new one than the old one, which is what I need. So I'm hoping this goes high enough. I think it will. And another thing to note is, even though these are both the same diameter and the same thread pitch, the new U-bolts take 1 1/8 inch socket, the nuts anyway, while the old ones take 1 1/16 inch. And the new ones also come with washers, which is good. So hopefully that'll keep these from loosening up. I've had these come loose on me a couple of times, and I've had to retighten them back up. Okay, so I've run into a slight problem here. So the U-bolts I got aren't going to work. The U-bolts I have, the threads do not go up high enough to tighten up everything. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to order some new U-bolts, hopefully that are shorter, and then have the threads go up a little bit higher. You got to expect things like this to happen when you're working on, 50-year-old cars. And obviously, aftermarket parts here, I'm lowering this truck, so you got to expect things to not work out exactly how you plan it. So it's a little bit of a setback on this project, but that's okay. We're just going to continue working, and hopefully we can get those U-bolts in so I can get this thing back together. But for now, I'm going to start working on getting these coil springs out. There we go. So we're going to try Mr. Half-inch breaker bar here and see what happens. I got it. So here's the carnage from last night. As you can see, it ended up either breaking off all the bolts or stripping the heads of them off. So I ended up having to get my dad to come out and help me. So we ended up having to sawzall and cut the spring retainers out, which wasn't really that bad. These upper spring retainers were already rotted out, as you can see. They were pretty bad. And the bottom ones, they were just really rusty, the bolts were. So we had to drive them out. But so with both of us underneath the truck, beating and prying and grinding and cutting, it was a little bit difficult. I don't think I could have recorded any of it. You just couldn't get a good camera angle of anything. And plus the lighting was really bad, so I didn't really feel like recording any of it anyway. And those are the shocks here. These are actually old vintage Gabriel hijackers is what they call these. These are the old ones with the old stickers on them. Nowadays they're just painted black. Back in the day they had these really cool logo. Can't really tell or can't really see what it says, but they used to say hijacker on there, so that was kind of cool. And here's where you fill those up at. When I first took it out of the barn, I actually tried to air them up, and they would jack the truck up, but they wouldn't hold any air. They just leak out. And then eventually the lines got so rotted that I couldn't even get it to jack up at all. So they're pretty much junk. I'm probably going to leave that in there, the air nozzle here, just because I think it's pretty cool. But one of these days I might put air shocks back underneath it, but not right now. So now what I've got to do is clean all this up. Probably going to needle scale it all off, needle scale all the rust off, clean all this frame up. And as you can see, it's getting pretty bad. The rust is gotten in between the frame rail and this piece, this cross member here, and it's just, as you can tell, it's blistered it apart. So I believe the technical term for that is called rust jacking. And all it is rust gets in between these two pieces of steel and it kind of spreads them apart, and it's pretty nasty. So I'm going to try to knock as much of that out as I can. I'm not going to bore you with the cleaning process. All I'm going to do is just needle scale all the rust off and probably wire wheel it and then paint it. I'm not going for perfection. I just want something a little bit better than what it is right now. I got some new U-bolts here. These I had to order from LMC because I could not get any through Classic Industries. They were on back order. But as you can tell, these new ones from LMC are a lot shorter than these. I'm assuming these are for when you use lowering blocks, because these are about the same length as my old ones. So it was my fault. I should have got some shorter ones, but I thought I could just cut off what I didn't need and it would be threaded up pretty far, but unfortunately it is not. So with these new ones from LMC, I went ahead and painted them. They just come in bare steel pretty much, and it does include new hardware with these, so I've went ahead and painted those as well. As you can see, I got everything painted. I needle scaled all the rust off the lower trailing arms here. Just this section here I didn't go crazy. It'd be nice to do the rest of the truck, but I just don't have time right now. So and then I did the axle tube, the whole entire axle tube, just because it was a lot easier. There's a lot of scaly rust and just paint that needed to come off. And then I also did the underside of the frame, especially around where the coil spring is going to be mounting to. I made sure to get all that really good. I just used some Rusty Metal Primer, Rust-Oleum brand, and brush painted it on. And then I came back with some Rust-Oleum Gloss Black. I'm not a big fan of using gloss on frames. I did when I was younger. I did the rest of the truck the same way. When I first got it, I scraped the frame rails and put on some Rust-Oleum Gloss Black brush paint, and it's held up really good. That's what the rest of the truck is done in. I did this probably 2018, so about 3 years ago. Maybe it was 2019, can't remember, but it's held up really good. So I decided I was just going to try it again. And this stuff dries really fast, and even with the temperature that we're at right now in the wintertime here. I do like this. This is Duplicolor low gloss, and I painted these. I spray painted them, and then I had to set them by the fire in order to get them to heat up. That Duplicolor engine paint takes a lot more heat than that Rust-Oleum to dry. So just a little tip on that. But I'm going to try to get this thing going back together again. So I'm going to put a little bit of this blue Loctite 248 on there, just because I've had these nuts back off on me before. These do have washers on them, so it should help, but just to make me feel a little bit better, I'm going to put a little bit on there. So just like the ones from Classic Industries, these new U-bolts from LMC also take 1 1/8 socket or wrench. So just as a comparison here, we can see the new spring on the right and the old spring on the left. So not only is the new spring shorter than the old spring, it's also a smaller diameter, so it should lower the truck essentially. And I also have spring retainers in here as well. So this should slide right in there like that. So these spring retainers here should sit down like that. This is just part of a manual that I found on the internet, and I've just printed it off here. So I've got the spring and the spring retainer in the position that the picture shows here. and I got it as close as I could get it. So there's a little notch in this spring retainer here, and I believe that is supposed to be pointing towards the end of the coil here, and that's where you know that this is seated and isn't binding up. Now that I got that all together, I'm going to hop on over to the other side and get it in, and then I'm hoping I can jack the rear end up a little bit and try to correct that angle on the top one. I like to torque things in steps, so I'm going to torque them to 25 foot-pounds first, and then I'll torque them to 50. So according to the manual, this bottom one gets torqued to 45 foot-pounds. So I got my torque wrench set on 20 foot-pounds right now, and then we're going to go up to 45. Okay, so I'm working on the rear shocks here, and it comes with all these different bushings here, as you can see, and I'm trying to figure out which ones are going to work the best. And I found one here that fits this 1/2 inch bolt, which is what it's going to be on, and so that's going to work. But I think I'm going to have to cut this one down because this is the only other one that fits a 1/2 inch bolt really good, and it's going to be the same top and bottom for these. Obviously these shocks are made to fit multiple different, either multiple different vehicles or multiple different setups. I know there's some pretty crazy rear shock relocation kits that you can buy for these trucks, so I'm assuming that this is all to support all that aftermarket suspension setups. But I think this one's definitely going to work here, so I might have to cut down this one right here in order to get it to work, but it shouldn't be too big of a deal. So I'm going to get a little bit of grease on this bushing just so it goes in there nice and doesn't squeak, hopefully, because I'm trying to do everything I can to keep this suspension from squeaking and rattling around as much as I can. Okay, so I've got this socket here I'm going to try to drive this thing in with. And there we go. So now I got those bushings put in, I ended up having to cut this one off, like I said, and then this one here was too narrow, I guess. As you can see, I ended up having to use 2 bushings in there to get the right width. But now that I got that all done, I've got my bag of new hardware here and some washers. I got these washers here, and we're gonna crawl underneath this thing and see if we can't get these shocks on. And there we go. Manual says that these shock bolts get torqued down to like 145 foot-pounds, which is really high for a 1/2 inch grade 8 bolt. So I'm just going to do 50 because that seems about right. I think 145 is way too much for that. You'll probably end up bending or squishing in the bracket on the upper shock mount, so I'm just going to do 50. It should be fine. That's what the coil springs are at, so if it's good enough for the coil springs, it should be good enough for the shocks. So we're going to torque these down to 50. I've already got the bottom torqued to 25 right now, so shouldn't take much. So these U-bolts get torqued to 200 foot-pounds, which is a lot. So I've already went ahead and done the other side just to make sure I could do it. First I'm going to do 70, and then I'm probably going to do 130, 175, and then 200. Hopefully my Chinese torque wrench doesn't explode. So as you can see now, the tires kind of fill the fender wells up. So this is a 235/75 R15. The reason why it had such a tall tire on it was to fill up the fender well. And now that it's lowered, I could probably do just a 235/70 R15, which is what most people I think run on these trucks, is around that range. But it looks pretty good in the back, I think. I like the way that it, looks. It's definitely a lot lower than what it was. I wasn't expecting that much of a difference with the old leaf springs being so wore out, and then on top of the lowering blocks, but it's got a little bit of a squat in it, so we're definitely going to have to fix that. We'll have to get this thing out and turn it around and start working on the front side.